A couple of years ago, I shared a mini documentary series on the history of kettlebells. With the help of my friend Jeronimo Milo, I attempted to outline the timeline of how the kettlebell came into existence. The knowledge of physical culture has been passed down through generations, and I see it as my duty to contribute to this tradition by exploring the origins of the kettlebell. A seemingly simple tool, but one that, when applied correctly, has the power to change lives. My research took me back to the early 20th century, when influential figures like Dr. Vladislaw Krajeswki, Georg Hackenschmidt, Ivan Lebedev, also known as Uncle Vanya, and the Polish legend Pytla, just to name a few, developed exercises such as the clean and press, jerk, and snatch. These formative years solidified these powerful movements as the foundational exercises we still use today. In this video, I want to fast forward approximately 80 years to the early 2000s and highlight a figure who will become known worldwide as the man responsible for bringing the kettlebell back into public consciousness, at least in the West. Before we delve into how Pavel transformed from a stretching instructor into a kettlebell specialist, it's important to examine a key part of kettlebell history. If we trace the kettlebell's journey back to the early 20th century, we find that kettlebell training was cultivated in Tsarist Russia. As Edmond de Bonnet noted in his book The Kings of Strength, physical activity in that era had one primary goal: to train the next generation of soldiers either for defense or conquest. Early footage of Russian soldiers lifting kettlebells hints at the origins of athletic competition that evolved into kettlebell sport in the 1960s. Legends like Valery Fedorenko and Sergei Rudnev, both pioneers of competitive kettlebell lifting, confirm that they competed in the sport during their youth, corroborating the formation of girevoy sport long before Pavel burst onto the scene. The historical foundation laid the groundwork for Pavel's early kettlebell training methodology, which he developed alongside another influential but often overlooked figure, John Duan, founder of Dragon Door.
I showed up at his flexibility workshop. There were about 70 people crowded into this small room. There were young ballerinas, there were grizzled vets, there were powerlifters, and they were all getting great results from his stretching techniques.
John Duan's skills in the world of direct marketing would soon become pivotal in their early success. Pavel even noted in his writings that he earned the title of Master of Sport in girevoy sport, one of the highest honors an athlete can achieve in the Russian sports world. Most of the insights I'm sharing now come from conversations with early kettlebell adopters, such as Steve Carter, Sean Mosen, Dan John, Sergei Rudnev, Valery Fedorenko, and John Duan himself. Unfortunately, after reaching out to Strong First, I learned that Pavel was not interested in sharing his experience and expertise with me. Nevertheless, let's dive into the conversation that sparked one of the most significant changes in the history of fitness. John Duan first met Pavel at one of his stretching seminars and was immediately captivated by Pavel's enigmatic persona.
I saw this guy was very charismatic. He had a really interesting presentation style, and he was a good actor. You know, he was a true presenter.
Curious about a potential collaboration, John approached Pavel, and the two met for a discussion not long after.
Pavel came to me. A Russian hockey player had given him a couple of kettlebells, and he said, "Hey John, you know, I used to train with these when I was a strength and conditioning coach for the Spetsnaz. Do you think we can do anything with kettlebells in America?" Soon after,
John and Pavel devised a plan based on three core elements. Number one, use Pavel's charismatic and confident personality as the brand, building on the foreign man from a foreign land persona, positioning him as the tough, no-nonsense Russian instructor. Number two, leverage John's direct marketing expertise to push this message to the world with full force. Number three, combine these strengths with a training modality that was shrouded in mystery. These steps led to the birth of the Russian Kettlebell Challenge, also known as RKC. The early RKC seminars were instrumental and an immediate success, drawing hundreds of people, especially martial artists and former athletes who were fascinated by kettlebells. And not just any kettlebell, the original cast iron design that John and Pavel created, though unfortunately never patented. So you were the originators of the cast iron as we know it?
Yes, and those first sizes.
Did you get a patent on it?
This was the problem. Kettlebells existed. Pavel and I, neither of us were kind of very legally oriented, and we didn't really know what we had. We didn't lock down even carefully the intellectual property that we were developing with the RKC. Yeah, so everyone and their brother within 2 or 3 years said, this kettlebell thing is really hot.
However, there was a challenge. Pavel introduced the bent press as a foundational exercise, only to be be told by a young, incredibly strong athlete named Dan John that it wasn't practical for teaching. Additionally, Steve Maxwell, another accomplished martial artist, introduced the Turkish get-up into the kettlebell curriculum. Kettlebell pioneers like Steve Cotter, Sean Mosen, and Jeff Martone also contributed their perspectives to the early development of Western-style kettlebell training. Pavel quickly surrounded himself with seasoned physical culturists who would help shape the RKC curriculum. At one point, Pavel and John invited Valery Fedorenko, a legend in girevoy sport, to give a seminar, but they soon realized that Valery's style was too complex and difficult to teach.
Actually, Pavel brought Valery Fedorenko.
Valery, yeah?
Yeah, he brought him to one of our RKC certifications in St. Paul. Pavel was very open to me taking Valery on and promoting girevoy sport. So Valery came and presented and actually had a big impact on a lot of the people. People like Jeff Martone and Steve Cotter were there, and they were very interested. I very deliberately decided that I didn't want to have Dragon Door promoting both girevoy sport and hardstyle. I felt that we should settle for hardstyle and make the most out of that.
And so knowledge of the origins of girevoy sport was largely set aside, making way for the rise of hardstyle kettlebell training and the RKC certifications. With the internet still in its infancy, the culture around RKC grew into a close-knit inner circle where any information outside of the official doctrine was either considered false or worse, an imposter. The certifications became more than just seminars. They became rituals, a rite of passage that fostered a strong and loyal community. But Valery's visit did leave a mark. Over time, cracks began to appear within the senior coaches as differing egos, training philosophies, and ideas started to clash. Steve Cotter, Sean Mosen, and Jeff Martone eventually traveled to Russia to learn more about the mysterious girevoy sport, which bore little resemblance to what they had been taught. This culture clash between hardstyle and girevoy sport gave birth to the original hybrids, a powerful breed of kettlebell practitioners who combined the high-tension techniques of the West with the high-volume approach of the East. Eventually, the original team of coaches parted ways with RKC. Steve Cotter founded the IKFF, and Jeff Martone became involved with a new fitness movement called CrossFit in the early 2010s. Despite the departure of his inner circle, Pavel remained undeterred, continuing to push the boundaries of RKC. However, a disagreement over the company's direction ultimately severed his collaboration with John Duquesne, leading to the creation of Strong First.
He ended up jumping ship in a rather abrupt manner, and he took about 80% of our instructors with him. Again, it didn't protect ourselves very well when that happened, so you could call it a massacre in some ways. It was a very, very difficult period for all of us, and very high number of the people who chose to go with Pavel did so not wanting this to happen. But it happened.
This brings us to the present day. With the internet now a fully developed force, ideas about kettlebell training have spread far and wide, and many new faces have joined the ever-growing world of kettlebell enthusiasts. Whether one accepts or challenges Pavel's methods, there's no denying the impact he and John had. Without their early push, many of us may have never heard of kettlebells at all. We're all standing on the shoulders of giants, even if we challenge, question, or disagree with the current understanding of kettlebell training. If you like this video, please consider subscribing and share it with a friend. And if you want to learn more about kettlebells, download my free ebook in the first link in the description called the Kettlebell Code. If you're over 40, 50, or 60, you don't have a lot of time, but you still want to take care of your fitness, this is where the kettlebell comes in. And my ebook is going to show you exactly how to get started. So download it right now in the first link in the description. It's 100% free.